So because we're following the pattern that's being used at Cadborough Bay, where we preach on and focus on one scripture reading for an entire month. And it's not just that Cadborough Bay uses this. Now that it's recognized that many people just come to church once a month, we take... That's become the new norm. So we take one passage and just have speak about it from different angles. So today, in that passage, which will be familiar to lots of people who've attended church for some time, and for whom it may be new if you haven't been attending for a while, I want to take it in three parts. Part one this week, part two next week, and part three the week after. So I want to look at the first step as a spiritual condition. What happens when we run out of wine? Wine is often used as a metaphor in the biblical, in our spiritual lives for the energy of life, the fervor, the vibrancy, the vitality of life. We'll say of someone, they're like a good wine. So in this first step of seeing this story as a spiritual journey, what happens when we run out of wine? When the joy of living, when the fun of life leaves us, when it feels like we're running on empty. And our friends come to us and say, hey, it feels like you're running out of wine. Conversely, what is it when we see that what we have relied on, the wine that has been there, is no longer sufficient for the tasks that are before us, to the circumstances that we find ourselves in? So those two ways of looking at this passage. Most of us absolutely fight the spiritual condition of feeling empty. Because the place of feeling empty is at the end of a long spiritual process. Most of us would rather feel angry than empty. We'd rather feel sad. If some loss, something is in our lives is coming to an end, we'd rather do battle with it than simply let ourselves feel empty. Rather than just let ourselves surrender to the circumstances. Sheila and I had a friend recently who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And she was told that at most she would have 6 months to live. Well, she made it 5 months. When it came to the time when she was her chosen time of death, I guess you could say, she said, "You know, I would rather have had these 5 months than 5 years living as I had been." And she'd been living a good life and a very vital life. But she said she had been thrown to a spiritual place when she found out that there was nothing she could do to alter the course of the pancreatic cancer. She couldn't fight it. She couldn't bargain it away. She had to struggle with fear. And she said finally, she just stopped it all. And that stopping it all, stopping the fight, stopping trying to control what was going to happen, just stopping, she said, was the start of a life that was so rich and so amazing that she would not have traded it for more time. We were surprised. But I tell you that story to say most of us live with a high degree of self-direction and self-sufficiency. We're in charge of our lives. That's the kind of myth we tell ourselves. And day to day, we kind of are. But there probably comes a time in all of our lives when we're confronted with the fact that all the self-sufficiency that we have is not sufficient. And that we are not going to be in control of our destiny. And after we fight that, after we get angry about it, after we bargain and are sad and everything that goes with that, we are sat down and said, I don't know what to do. And in our spiritual lives, when we get to that place where we've given up trying to control what is going to happen and say, I don't know what to do, that is the first stage of a spiritual practice, a spiritual journey that will lead us someplace different than we have been before. When what has worked no longer works, and we have stopped fighting it and trying to control it, that is a spiritually rich place to be. Even though in our human impulse, it feels like that's a disastrous place to be. Do you get what I'm talking about? Does it make sense? there was an old phrase that said, once we have given up trying to control our lives, that's when God can get to work. I think God's involved long before that, but you get the point. So today, I just want us to think about this first step in this spiritual practice. That of being like the host at the wedding, and the servants come and say, "Hey, Master, you're out of wine, and your guests still want more." And you say, "I don't know what to do. I don't have anything else. I don't have any more wine to give. I don't have anything else to serve them." So, I'm going to leave it there. Let you think about that this week. Think about those times in your life when the wine is gone and there isn't sufficient for the needs. What did you do? Where did you go? Don't tell me to the liquor store, because that answers. That's out of bounds, okay? Next week, we'll look at that next step of starting to look around to say, if what we had isn't sufficient, what do we have now to start looking to address the situation? That'll be when we find the water. Okay? Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking that as a homework assignment to think about being empty, giving up control, letting go of self-sufficiency, and being open to what else might help us find a new way. Thank you for listening.